Here is a building technique that we've pioneered here at Aprovecho and is actually now a part of the Lane County Code, which is the use of these flat-sided poles. Now in Oregon forests, often these small diameter round poles are an undesirable fuel load in forests that are potentially dangerous and forest fire causing fuel loads. So what we've done here is take that product that industrial forestry doesn't really know what to do with, because they can't make a 2x4 out of it, and flatten one side and put those flat sides facing out. And what happens is that these two small diameter poles takes the place of, in this case, a 2x8.
This is Peak Moment. We are living at a peak of human innovation, information, wealth, and health. But we're also at a peak of population and consumption, with rising temperatures and declining resources fueled by cheap oil and gas. Peak Moment Television, bringing you examples of positive responses to energy decline and climate change through local community action.
Hi, welcome to Peak Moment. I'm Janaea Donaldson. I'm upstairs in the community meeting hall at Aprovecho Center in Cottage Grove, Oregon, with Chris Foraker, who is, well, okay, you tell us.
The coordinator for the Natural Building and Sustainable Shelter program here at Aprovecho.
Natural Building Sustainable Shelter. That's a big mouthful.
It's a lot, and yeah, it'll be abbreviated into a nice and concise acronym.
And what does it mean? What do you do?
Well, really, what my role here at Aprovecho is to carry forward our program and desire to address the issue of sustainable shelter here in the Willamette Valley.
And how would you define that?
Well, for us, what we've discovered here at Aprovecho is that, or what we're trying to do, is really draw attention to the great opportunity to marry the principles of green design and the practice of natural building. So not only are we attempting to pay attention to the way we design our buildings, but also the materials that we use to construct those buildings, and introduce to the Willamette Valley, or remind the Willamette Valley, of the incredible and rich resources that we have growing right here in our own local place that will allow us to reintroduce regional vernacular architecture.
So a regional vernacular architecture. So what would those elements be, those materials, if you will, in your vernacular, your region?
Well, here in the Willamette Valley, we have an incredible resource of forest.
Yes.
And so wood is absolutely a component of that regional vernacular architecture. As well, we have clay, we have sand, and we have straw, which are also really very key components in the natural building world. So right here on site, we have an incredibly rich resource of clay, which, as you can see, we're beginning to put on the walls inside of our buildings.
So this building that we're sitting in is sort of a demonstration of exactly what you're talking about?
Absolutely. This and the room that we're sitting in here is probably our finest example of the trajectory of the natural building program here at Aprovecho.
Want to show me?
Absolutely.
Okay.
This wall here is a great example of what Aprovecho's natural building program is trying to achieve. Here we have Douglas fir, tongue and groove paneling, which we're using for wainscoting, that is cut, milled, dried, and processed right here on site.
From your own trees?
From our own trees.
It dried as well?
Dried as well. We have a solar wood drying kiln where the planks go after being milled.
Because you really have to have these not bending and, right?
That's right. And if there is going to be twist and bend, we need to take that. We want that to happen before we do the processing. So, so here we're putting the Douglas fir wainscoting, making it on site, using it as part of our wall system, and then here where traditionally drywall would be, which is the third most energy-intensive building material.
Is that right?
Behind steel and concrete.
Wow, I didn't realize that.
Here is a clay-based earthen plaster. used or composed of straw, sand, and clay. The clay comes from on site. It comes from our pond sites. So we're opening up our water catchment capacity and then using that clay to cover our walls.
So let me see, you're digging down the ponds and getting clay out even as you're getting more water capacity.
Right, so we're catching more water and we're building our buildings with the clay.
This has the nicest texture. I mean, it just feels really, it sort of reminds me a little bit of cork, like it has a texture like that, but it's, and it's like it breathes, it's like it's porous, it's not really slick.
Absolutely. There's a lot of great qualities to clay, and it's great to hear you say that because these walls here were done essentially by amateurs, people who were just learning the process, and I think they did a great job.
They did. It doesn't. I mean, it looks like I mean, I see that there's this lovely undulation in here. It's like feels sort of organic,
right?
But not crude.
Right.
But not crude. They did a lovely job. And with what's this?
And that's a lighting sconce.
That's a nice way to do
there
it.
with a little bit of dye. And
Oh.
what's important about this, Janae, too, is that really a key component of natural building is the component of empowerment. Not only are we using local materials that come from our own farm here, but we're also using techniques that don't take industrial levels of technology, that take a very simple awareness of how to use the materials, and then the ability to essentially apply this wall and make this wall with your hands.
So you're empowering people to take hold of how they do their buildings, their shelter, and tools that they could probably even fabricate maybe themselves.
Absolutely. I mean, for me, as the coordinator of the Sustainable Shelter Program here at Aprovecho, a key component of sustainability is empowerment. And we're trying to include that into the way we build our buildings. And empowerment, yes, is linked to using local materials instead of depending on a global network of shipping that if the trucks stop coming, then we don't have our drywall anymore. So there is a component of empowerment that is linked to local materials, but as well, that empowerment is linked to how those materials are applied. And if we're depending on technology that we can't fix ourselves in order to make our shelter, then we're not empowered over our shelter.
Right, then you're dependent on something outside, which most of us are.
Which most of us are.
So you're turning that part around. What, obviously, is this clay just on, what's it on top of? I mean, what's underneath here to hold it in?
Reed matting and lath, and I can actually show you. We have a truth window here.
A truth window?
A truth window.
Oh, that's a new.
And you may recognize this shape.
That's a Fibonacci spiral.
Fibonacci spiral.
Which is the harmonics that you find in a golden nautilus shell,
or in a clay plaster wall, we like to think. And here you see reed matting and wooden lath. Now the wooden lath is a byproduct of our wood processing system. When we make this wainscoting here, we have to edge the boards to the right size, and that often produces between 1/4 of an inch and a 3/8 inch piece of long wood such as this.
Okay.
And we use that as a holding material for the clay plaster, which goes on top. Now here you see 3 different coats. We've started now to just do 2 coats of plaster when we're doing a wall now. We have an adhesion coat, which binds the clay to the lath, whether it be matting, the reed matting, or the wooden lath, which you can see has longer pieces of straw, has maybe a little bit more clay content, which is the binding force, and isn't necessarily smooth. It has a certain roughness to it. Now on top of that base coat, or that adhesion coat, we're either putting this finish coat here, which is what you see on all the walls. We're putting the finish coat on top of that base coat.
So what happens, what do you do for sort of strength? Is this going to crack? I mean, if we were in earthquake country, will this stuff crack
Yeah.
Do you have to repair it? Can you paint it? You know, that kind of thing.
Absolutely. Well, the answer to most of your questions is yes. It will probably crack in an earthquake, but yes, you can repair it, and yes, you can paint it, but you wouldn't necessarily want to paint it with a latex paint. What you see here on this wall is actually an example of an elise, which is a clay-based paint, using not a non-local clay, but a lighter pigmented white clay, and we could take this pigment and essentially roll it on over our earthen plaster walls, which allows us to introduce color into the wall if all you have on your site is dark clay.
Yeah.
Now the great thing about the earthen plaster walls is as I can show you, we have a 5-gallon bucket of dried plaster material. If there was to ever be a significant nick or hole in the wall, we would simply reconstitute that with water and apply that to the patch.
And of course it would fit back in because it's the same stuff, I assume.
It's the same material. And you're going to see, it's going to be, you're going to know that it was a patch.
So what we're looking at here is not Sunset Magazine, you know, everything is uniform. We're going to look at, I mean, I get the sense of this building sort of being alive or breathing or organic in both in the sense, both the materials, but also in the story it's going to tell over time. As you patch it, as you
Absolutely, it will wear differently than a drywall wall. But you know, even with that said, if with drywall, a drywall takes this is just as sturdy as drywall, and if you run a hole into the drywall, you're doing the same thing. You have to patch it, and then you repaint the whole thing. We similarly can do that same process with the earthen plaster wall, which allows us to really create a sense of uniformity and finished wall surface.
So is this a different plaster that you
this is a lime plaster here, which is also a natural material. It's as you can feel, it's very hard.
It's more abrasive. It's like sandpaper.
It also can be more abrasive. This is a rough coat here, but we tried this out initially because it was so hard. But really, when taking a look at what we're trying to achieve with our building program, the fact that this is still somewhat of an industrial product, and that we don't produce it here locally, those two reasons inspired us to look elsewhere, and we're very happy with the earthen plasters that we've come up with.
Well, now that we've seen what's on the wall, I mean, the anatomy of what's on the wall, I want to know, can you give us the anatomy of how the structure is built?
Absolutely. I would love to take you downstairs.
Okay, I'll follow you.
Okay.
Tell me about the structures of this whole thing. Wow.
Well, as we mentioned before, Janae, we're very fortunate here in the Willamette Valley to be surrounded by an incredible abundance of forest. And not only here at Aprovecho, but in the Willamette Valley as a whole. And we're fortunate in that sense because we can build our buildings out of them. The structural skeleton of this building here is 80% wood that comes from right on site, from our own 40-acre parcel. And some of those are dimensional lumber that I can show you that are in the walls, but we try to keep them as close to their original form as possible, recognizing that the closer they are to their original form, the less amount of processing went into them. And so here you have an example of incredibly well-crafted Douglas fir pole trusses that were put together by a local craftsman. And this is holding up this roof, all these pole trusses.
You've got them in the roof, you've got the trusses, you've got some, lateral beams and some columns, right? Is
Post
that
and beam.
Post and beam, thank you. And then, so that's holding up the whole roof.
That's holding up this roof, Yep, you got it. And you can see here, again, another example of the tongue and groove paneling that we're producing from from our grand fir trees in this case.
Show me the structural lumber too. You used dimensional lumber. I think that's what you said. You said came from here as well.
Yeah, I want to show you that, and I want to show you our flat-sided poles as well.
Flat-sided poles.
The flat-sided poles are, well, the dimensional lumber is here. It's stuff that you buy at the hardware store. We mill it on site from on-site trees, and a grader comes out and grades the quality of it, which then allows us to use it legally in our buildings.
For your permits.
Yep.
Okay.
For
all
permitting.
Right.
Here is a building technique that we've pioneered here at Aprovecho and is actually now a part of the Lane County Code, which is the use of these flat-sided poles. Now in Oregon forests, often these small diameter round poles are an undesirable fuel load in forests that are potentially dangerous and forest fire
yeah.
causing fuel loads. So what we've done here is take that product that industrial forestry doesn't really know what to do with, because they can't make a 2x4 out of it, and flatten one side and put those flat sides facing out. And what happens is that these two small diameter poles takes the place of, in this case, a 2x8. And that's just another technique that we're using in order to make best use of and make full use of our local building materials here in the Willamette Valley.
And as you said, less processing.
Less processing, yeah. And that's one cut on the saw.
That's brilliant. Brilliant. So show me the inside of the walls.
Sure.
That was kind of interesting little place over here. What's this?
Yeah, what we're doing here is, so these are planer shavings and clay. And this
planer?
is...
Wood.
Wood, yes.
Okay.
Planer shavings. When we take the rough planks and make them smooth for the tongue and groove paneling, it goes through a planer, a very simple planer. And those planer shavings are just rich and fluffy. Now what we've done here in these interior walls is to combine a clay slip, which is a very watery clay, coat the planer shavings with the clay, and then loosely pack them into the walls. And we're using that as an acoustic insulation. It can equally be used as a insulation to keep
a thermal insulation.
A thermal insulation as well.
So did you use that on your outer walls, or did you?
No, the outer walls are we used a recycled newspaper. The blown-in cellulose insulation is what we used on the outer walls.
Still a natural material.
Still a natural material, 85% recycled newspaper. This is not yet permitted for exterior walls here in Lane County, but that's part of what the role that we see for ourselves here at Aprovecho is to be that interface between local government agencies and people who want to build well.
And as you do that for your county and get these things permitted, you're making the way for other people elsewhere to be able to do that as well.
That's the idea, yeah.
So inside, I want to see what you're doing on the floor. It's kind of a curious thing here.
This is a new addition here to Aprovecho. This is a subfloor, but it's an earthen floor. It's a sub-earthen floor. You see it scratched up and rough because there's going to be a finished floor on top. But essentially, these are the same components that you see in our earthen plaster walls. And we're beginning to explore their use as a viable flooring system for our buildings. It's becoming popular in Portland and other parts of the country as more people are applying earthen floors, and their durability and beauty are increasingly being embraced.
So this is, I feel it's very sandy, much more sandy than the wall that I touched earlier.
Very sandy, very rough. Once again, this isn't anywhere near what a finished earthen floor looks like. On top of this is a great application. If we had radiant tubes or radiant floor heating, you would put a base pour such as this on top of that radiant tubes, and then come back and do a finish pour. Now the finish pour is very smooth, and it really the durability and hardness depends on all the finishing oils that you put into the finished floor. It hardens up really surprisingly solid, and is very easily cleaned.
What's it made out of?
It's made out of clay, sand, and straw.
Oh, it's all the same materials.
Yeah.
Wow.
The finishing oils is a combination of tung oil, linseed oil, beeswax, and citrus solvent.
I'll look forward to seeing that next time we come back, see what you've done.
Absolutely.
What you've done on this.
I'm also looking forward to that.
I bet you are. Have that phase done. Wow. Chris, I noticed this really interesting structure when we first came to Aprovecho. What is this?
This is our solar wood drying kiln.
So wait, solar wood drying kiln?
That's right.
What happens here? I mean,
here is where the wood that we cut and mill on site is dried from anywhere to 80% moisture down to between 12 and 15% moisture content is really the best we can achieve at this point with the wood drying kiln in this valley.
That's a lot.
Yeah,
that's getting it pretty darn dry.
That's getting it
so
pretty dry.
So you just stack them between with slats in between, so there's room for the air to move.
Yep, the whole way that wood dries is for warm air to pass across the wood, which essentially gives the moisture an opportunity to evaporate off and be carried away.
And so you've got just some openings, so at the top, so that just the hot air just comes
And that's
out.
how the circulation happens. Yeah, and this is a really key and important component to our building program here at Aprovecho, because part of what we're trying to demonstrate is that we can perform a different style of forest management here in the southern Willamette Valley if we begin to add value to our wood products. And this here is a sustainable way that we're adding value to local wood products. Wood dried or kiln dried wood is more valuable than just raw logs.
Right, because you have the twisting and the right.
So we're using it in a domestic application for our own structures, but it's also a component of us demonstrating how to sustainably add value to local wood products.
This has been a fabulous tour. I have been really enjoying, getting to feel and see, this really living kind of structures. Yeah. So thank you for this.
Absolutely.
What I want to know is, what haven't we covered? What else would you like to add?
What haven't we covered? Well, we've covered the walls. We've covered
the floors.
And the floors. Really, for me, it's important that there's two things that are really important for me about the building program here at Aprovecho, and one of them is that the reintroduction and reintroduction of local materials and a regional vernacular architecture into the minds of local people. Essentially, we're trying to remind people that we live in an incredibly abundant place, and that if we become familiar with the materials in the world around us, we're able to build beautiful, living, organic, energy-efficient shelter that meets our needs and is a contributing member to the ecosystem that we live within, rather than a negatively contributing member. And so that's, for me, that's a key point in the building program here at Aprovecho, is the reintroduction of local materials and local style into the way we construct our buildings. And the other component as well is the issue of empowerment. I came here to Aprovecho as a sort of liberal environmentalist wanting to save the earth, which I think is still fine and good. But over the course of my time here, the emphasis has become more on empowerment of local people. And beautifully, those two things, environmentalism and empowerment, are intertwined and are essential complements. Because when we're able to successfully work with local ecologies in order to meet our needs, not only are we doing the earth a better service, but we're also doing ourselves. We're becoming more empowered over our own lives because we're able to work with the world around us. And so that's another component of our building program. Is it's not just local materials, but it's local materials combined with the ability for local people to use them.
Perhaps one way to think about that is it's local resources, including local culture.
Absolutely.
And you will find local aesthetics and so on. You know, we'll have the Aprovecho design sense, you know, or the Southern Willamette Valley School of, you know, pole design or whatever it is.
You've got it absolutely. And that diversity in the world is I think what we love and perhaps are missing. So.
Thank you. This has been a wonderful show. Thank you for sharing it with me.
Thank you.
Now that's really locally reliant living and building. This is Janaea Donaldson. You're watching Peak Moment. That's locally reliant living. My guest is Chris Foraker, and we are at Aprovecho. Join us next time.